Let's start with a truth that might make some people a little uncomfortable. We've been teaching women to misunderstand their own bodies for generations. We've told them that arousal is something that just happens, something linked only to desire, attraction, or romance. But biology tells a different story, a much deeper, more intricate one. Arousal in women is not a linear process that begins with wanting and ends with pleasure. It's circular, multifaceted, and in many ways, misunderstood. When Dr. Jennifer Berman began exploring the physiology of female arousal, she found something remarkable. Most women who came into her clinic thought something was wrong with them. They weren't in the mood. They felt disconnected from their bodies, or they couldn't reach orgasm even when they loved their partner. But as Dr. Berman began testing and scanning and studying, she found that the issue wasn't psychological at all. It was biological. And more importantly, it was societal. Women had been conditioned to believe that arousal was purely a matter of desire, when in truth, desire is only one small piece of the puzzle. Think about it. We live in a culture that tells men arousal is mechanical, stimulus and response, while women's arousal is mysterious. That mystery has been used as an excuse to ignore it. But when you look at the actual anatomy, there is nothing mysterious about it. It's elegant, complex, and responsive. The female sexual system involves a vast network of arteries, nerves, and tissues that rely heavily on circulation, hormonal balance, and most importantly, context. Arousal begins with blood flow, not with fantasy. It begins when the parasympathetic nervous system, the body's relaxation system, takes over. That's the system that slows your heart rate, deepens your breathing, and tells your brain, you're safe. And here's the key. That word safe is everything. Because when a woman's brain senses safety, it allows nitric oxide to release, blood vessels to dilate, and the entire pelvic region to awaken. The tissue of the clitoris, labia, and vaginal walls become engorged with blood, increasing sensation and lubrication. The body is literally preparing itself for connection. Now here's where the misunderstanding begins. Society tends to look at desire as the first spark, the emotional or mental wanting. But in most women, arousal often precedes desire, meaning the body begins to respond before the mind consciously feels desire. This is known as responsive arousal. Dr. Berman describes it as the body whispering, "Let's see if this feels good," instead of the mind declaring, "I want this." That's a massive difference. It means that if you wait to feel in the mood before initiating connection, you may never get there, because your body needs activation, warmth, and trust before your brain catches up. This is why foreplay isn't just a romantic suggestion. It's a biological necessity. The female body needs time, attention, and safety to activate its full response system. But the irony is that in most modern relationships, that space for slow awakening is the first thing we lose. Stress, rushing, performance pressure, all of these kill the physiological process of arousal. The hormone cortisol constricts blood vessels, blocking the very flow that creates pleasure. And when women feel unseen, unheard, or emotionally dismissed, their brains interpret that as danger. The arousal network shuts down, not because they don't love their partner, but because their biology is protecting them. You see, the female arousal system evolved not just for reproduction, but for bonding. The brain doesn't separate physical pleasure from emotional connection. When trust is present, oxytocin levels rise, increasing blood flow, and making the experience feel deeper and more connected. But when stress is present, the opposite happens. Blood is pulled away from the pelvis toward the limbs in preparation for fight or flight. The same body that can create new life can also shut down pleasure in seconds if it feels emotionally unsafe. That's not dysfunction. That's intelligence. Dr. Berman's research has shown time and again that female arousal is a reflection of the entire nervous system. It's not a switch. It's an orchestra. The brain, the heart, and the pelvis all communicate through hormonal messengers and neural signals. When one part is out of balance, the whole system feels it. That's why mindfulness, breathwork, and stress reduction aren't just wellness trends. They're legitimate tools for restoring sexual function. And yet, how often are women told this? How often are they taught to see their own anatomy as something powerful, something capable of incredible sensory and emotional depth? Too often, they're told the opposite, that they're low libido, frigid, or broken. But the truth is, you cannot light a flame in a hurricane. You cannot ask a nervous system flooded with cortisol to open itself to pleasure. Dr. Berman often reminds her patients, arousal is not about being turned on. It's about being tuned in. Tuning into the body's signals, noticing what creates warmth, safety, and curiosity. In one of her seminars, she described arousal as the body's language of readiness. It's not something you force, it's something you listen to. And that requires awareness, patience, and self-compassion. Let's go even deeper into the anatomy. The clitoris, as modern imaging has revealed, is not just an external nub. It's an entire internal network that surrounds the vaginal canal. It's shaped almost like a wishbone, with two long legs that extend deep inside the pelvis. During arousal, these structures swell, creating internal pressure and sensitivity. This is why deep pleasure often feels like a wave that starts from within. It's literally your internal anatomy awakening. And that's just one part of it. There's also the urethral sponge, the vestibular bulbs, and the pelvic floor, all contributing to the symphony of sensation. Every one of these structures depends on circulation. That's why sexual wellness is also vascular health. Exercise, hydration, and proper blood flow are just as essential to pleasure as communication and foreplay. In fact, Dr. Berman's research found that women with better cardiovascular fitness often report stronger, longer-lasting arousal. The body's pleasure system is not separate from health, it is health. Now imagine what happens when a woman carries chronic stress, body shame, or emotional neglect. The body tenses, blood flow decreases, and the nervous system stays in a state of alert. Over time, this can create what Dr. Berman calls arousal fatigue. The body stops responding because it's protecting itself. It's not a lack of attraction or love, it's a lack of regulation. And that's why education is so powerful. Once a woman understands that arousal isn't about performance but physiology, she can begin to rebuild that connection with herself. Here's something profound. Arousal doesn't begin in the bedroom. It begins in the mind. It begins when a woman feels emotionally seen, when she feels respected, when she can trust that her body won't be rushed or judged. It begins when she gives herself permission to feel. That's the foundation. Because arousal isn't an act. It's a state of being. It's the body's way of saying, I'm home. I'm safe. I can let go. One of the most common findings in Dr. Berman's clinical practice is that when women start focusing on stress reduction, self-touch, and mindful awareness, their arousal returns naturally. No medication required. She often says, when you stop fighting your body starts working for you. It's the same principle. You'd apply to any healing process. You can't heal in a state of war with yourself. But let's also talk about the mental conditioning that keeps so many women disconnected. From a young age, girls are taught to suppress curiosity about their own anatomy. They're taught to hide, to stay quiet, to be modest, to associate their own pleasure with shame. That conditioning seeps into adulthood, shaping how women experience their own arousal. They might dissociate from their bodies or feel guilty for wanting more. But the female body was designed for pleasure. Every inch of its structure reflects that. The clitoral network exists for one purpose only: sensation. It serves no reproductive function, only joy. That alone should be a clue to how central pleasure is to feminine health and identity. When we start seeing pleasure not as indulgence but as intelligence, everything changes. Because arousal is the body's way of connecting, to another person, yes, but also to itself. It's how the body says, I'm alive. It's how it says, I can receive. It's how it heals. The misunderstood science of female arousal is not just a medical issue, it's a cultural one. It's the product of silence, stigma, and centuries of misinformation. But that's starting to change. Through Dr. Berman's work and the voices of countless women reclaiming their narratives, we are beginning to see pleasure as part of wellness, intimacy as part of health, and arousal as part of vitality. When women understand how their bodies truly function, they stop asking permission to feel. They start reclaiming their right to sensation, connection, and joy. They stop comparing themselves to unrealistic expectations and start trusting their own rhythms. Because there is no single way a woman should respond. There is only the truth of her body in the moment. And that truth is always valid. So the next time someone says a woman has low desire, remember, Desire is just one note in a much larger song. The real question isn't, why doesn't she want it? The real question is, what's standing in the way of her body feeling safe enough to open? Arousal is not about performing desire. It's about allowing it. It's about understanding that the body knows how to awaken, how to flow, how to bloom if only given time, trust, and tenderness. Dr. Berman's research teaches us that every woman has the potential for profound pleasure because that's how she's built. It's written into her biology, her blood flow, her brain chemistry. It's not about fixing anything. It's about remembering what was always there. And when that happens, when a woman stops seeing arousal as a test she has to pass and starts seeing it as a dialogue she gets to participate in, everything changes. Her confidence deepens. Her connection strengthens. Her body becomes an ally again. That's not just the science of arousal. It's the science of self-awareness. It's the realization that pleasure isn't something we earn. It's something we're wired for. The misunderstood science of female arousal is finally being rewritten, not as a mystery to solve, but as a truth to celebrate. Because the moment a woman understands her body's design, she doesn't just awaken her arousal, she awakens her power. If we were to strip away the myths, the shame, and the cultural confusion that have surrounded women's bodies for centuries, what we would find underneath is something breathtaking. A design built not just for reproduction, but for pleasure, connection, and communication. The female body isn't a puzzle to decode. It's an ecosystem of sensation and emotion, built to experience intimacy on multiple levels at once: physical, psychological, and spiritual. When Dr. Jennifer Berman talks about the anatomy of female pleasure, she doesn't describe it as an isolated system or a single organ. She calls it a network of connection. And that's precisely what it is. Every part of the female sexual anatomy, visible and invisible, exists in relationship to something else. The clitoris connects to the pelvic nerves, which connect to the spinal cord, which connects to the brain's pleasure centers. The brain responds to emotional cues and hormonal signals, which in turn affect blood flow and muscular tension. Every layer is in dialogue. Pleasure is not confined to one point. It's distributed, expansive, and intelligent. The female clitoris, the structure most people associate with pleasure, is only the tip of an extraordinary system. For years, even medical textbooks reduced it to a small external nub. But imaging technology like MRI scans has revealed the full extent of its anatomy, a structure that extends deep beneath the surface, with 2 long crura that run along the pelvic floor and 2 bulbs that wrap around the vaginal opening. Altogether, the clitoral network measures roughly the size of a small hand, and every part of it is rich with nerve endings, over 8,000 in total, making it the most sensitive organ in the human body. That's not coincidence. That's design. But here's what's often overlooked. Those nerves don't exist for reproduction. They exist for pleasure alone. No other organ in the human body has such a singular purpose. And yet that pleasure isn't only physical. When the clitoral network is stimulated and blood flow increases, it doesn't just send signals of sensation. It sends signals of safety and connection to the brain. The limbic system, which governs emotion, releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. This is why physical intimacy can create emotional closeness. The design itself ensures that pleasure and connection are biologically intertwined. Beyond the clitoris, there's an entire internal landscape that contributes to this experience. The vaginal walls are not passive. They're highly dynamic, filled with muscular tissue and sensitive nerve endings that respond to rhythm, depth, and pressure. The anterior wall, often associated with the so-called G-spot, contains the urethral sponge, a spongy network of tissue rich in blood vessels and nerves. When aroused, it swells, increasing pressure and heightening sensation. This is one reason why internal stimulation can produce feelings of fullness and release. The pelvic floor, a set of muscles at the base of the pelvis, plays an equally vital role. These muscles contract rhythmically during orgasm, but they also respond to emotional and physical tension. A relaxed pelvic floor allows blood to flow freely. A tense or overcontracted one can block arousal entirely. This means emotional stress, trauma, or even poor posture can directly impact pleasure. The female body holds memory, and the pelvis is one of its most expressive areas. When a woman learns to relax and connect with this region, through breath, movement, or mindfulness, she often rediscovers sensations that had been numbed or dormant. What's extraordinary is how all of This ties into emotional connection. Dr. Berman emphasizes that the female body is not wired for detached pleasure. It's wired for relational pleasure. The same hormones that amplify arousal, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, are the ones that create trust, attachment, and love. It's why intimacy feels safer and more profound when emotional connection is present. The body doesn't separate the two. Pleasure for women is both a physical and emotional language. It's how the body says, I trust you, I feel you, I'm open. This is also why safety is such a critical part of the arousal process. Without it, the body's design can't fully activate. When a woman feels emotionally distant or physically rushed, her body interprets that as a form of threat. The sympathetic nervous system, the fight-or-flight mechanism, kicks in. Heart rate increases, muscles tighten, and blood is pulled away from the pelvic region. In that state, the very anatomy designed for pleasure is deprived of what it needs most: circulation and oxygen. It's not about disinterest. It's about biology protecting itself. But when safety is restored, when there's patience, touch, and emotional presence, the opposite happens. The parasympathetic system activates. Blood vessels open, sensation increases. The body moves from guarding to receiving. That moment, where the body begins to trust, is where true pleasure begins. It's not about friction. It's about flow. Dr. Berman often says that women's bodies are designed not for quick release, but for crescendo. The anatomy supports gradual awakening, deepening, and expansion. The process of arousal in women can take 10, 20, even 30 minutes to fully develop, and that's not dysfunction. That's optimal function. Each layer of tissue and nerve becomes more responsive with time and patience. That slow buildup leads to a more profound, full-body experience. In fact, research shows that when women reach orgasm after extended arousal, the activation patterns in their brains light up regions associated with emotion, memory, and empathy, areas that remain quiet during male orgasm. It's as if the female body's pleasure response is designed not just to feel good, but to connect deeply, with the partner, with herself, with life itself. Every anatomical feature contributes to that connection. The breasts, for example, are filled with sensory receptors linked to the same areas of the brain as the clitoris. Stimulation of the nipples triggers the release of oxytocin, reinforcing bonding and emotional warmth. Even the skin itself, the body's largest organ, participates in this design. Touch, gentle, slow, intentional touch, activates C-tactile fibers that send messages of comfort and affection to the brain. It's no wonder that tenderness can ignite arousal more effectively than intensity. The body was built to respond to love as much as to touch. When Dr. Berman discusses the female anatomy in her lectures, she often points out that nature never creates something so complex without purpose. The network of sensory pathways, the hormonal responses, the deep need for emotional connection, all of it is part of a biological architecture meant to bond, heal, and unify. Responding, the body's natural rhythms align. Heart rates synchronize. Breathing patterns match. This is not poetic exaggeration. It's measurable. Studies using EEG and heart rate monitoring have shown that during moments of deep connection, partners' physiological responses mirror each other almost perfectly. The body becomes an instrument of empathy. That's what makes the female anatomy so extraordinary. It's not simply about individual pleasure, but about shared experience. The same structures that amplify sensation also amplify emotion. The same signals that heighten arousal also heighten love. It's no accident that in moments of true intimacy, tears and laughter can appear side by side. The female body was designed to feel deeply, to process connection through physical sensation. What's fascinating is that even outside of partnered intimacy, this design still serves women. Self-touch, mindfulness, and body awareness all activate the same pathways. The body doesn't distinguish between emotional safety with another person and emotional safety with oneself. Learning to inhabit your own body, to move, breathe, and touch with presence, sends the same neurological signals of trust and pleasure. The body is always ready to communicate. It's the mind that often forgets how to listen. When women begin to explore their anatomy with curiosity instead of judgment, they often describe a sense of homecoming. They start noticing sensations they hadn't felt in years. Their posture changes, their breath deepens, their confidence grows. That's not just emotional, it's physiological reawakening. Blood flow improves, the pelvic floor relaxes, and the nervous system recalibrates. This is why Dr. Berman calls knowledge of one's anatomy a gateway to empowerment. Because understanding your design gives you agency over your experience, and that's the core truth. The female body was never designed to be passive. It's not something pleasure is done to. It's something that co-creates pleasure through awareness, movement, and communication. The anatomy supports feedback, participation, and reciprocity. It invites connection, not consumption. If we truly honored the intelligence of this design, we would teach girls from a young age that their bodies are capable of profound joy, that pleasure is not shameful, and that their anatomy is a source of wisdom. We would teach partners that connection starts with presence, not performance. We would see sexuality not as something to be conquered or controlled, but as a living expression of health and wholeness. The female body's anatomy is not random. Every structure, every nerve, every pulse of blood exists to serve a larger purpose: to connect. To connect to self, to partner, to life. The clitoral network, the pelvic floor, the heart, and the brain all harmonize in one universal message. You were designed to feel. And when women embrace that truth, when they stop apologizing for their depth, their slowness, their sensitivity, they begin to live from the intelligence of their design. They begin to see that their anatomy is not something to overcome, but something to celebrate. Because the female body doesn't just experience pleasure, it teaches it. It teaches what it means to surrender, to trust, to merge without losing oneself. That's the gift of this design. It's not just about arousal or climax. It's about connection in its purest form. It's about the body's ability to turn sensation into meaning, touch into understanding, and pleasure into presence. The female anatomy was built not only to feel deeply, but to remind humanity what true intimacy looks like. Not dominance or performance, but resonance. Two bodies, two hearts, one rhythm. And perhaps that's the most profound truth of all. The female body is nature's masterpiece of connection, built to translate love into sensation and sensation back into love, reminding us that pleasure is not the opposite of spirituality or science. It's where the two finally meet. Have you ever wondered what really happens inside the body when arousal begins? Not as a feeling, but as a biological process? It's not magic, it's movement. Specifically, it's the movement of blood, the silent, rhythmic flow that transforms the body from a state of rest into a state of readiness. When we talk about female arousal, most people think of emotion, of mood, of mental stimulation. But at its foundation, arousal is vascular. It begins in the bloodstream. And when Dr. Jennifer Berman began studying the physiology of female arousal, she discovered something striking. The same mechanism that governs male arousal also governs female arousal. The difference is not in the process, it's in how that process expresses itself. At its core, arousal is about circulation. Every feeling of warmth, sensitivity, and pleasure is the result of increased blood flow. When a woman becomes aroused, her heart rate rises slightly. Blood vessels in the pelvic region dilate, and oxygen-rich blood floods the tissues of the vulva, clitoris, and vaginal walls. This engorgement makes the tissue softer, fuller, and far more responsive to touch. It's the body's way of amplifying sensation. Just as an artist mixes colors to bring a painting to life, the body mixes blood and nerve activity to bring pleasure into being. Now, here's where the parallel with men becomes fascinating. In both sexes, arousal begins with the same neurovascular process, the release of nitric oxide. When the brain perceives sexual stimulation, whether from touch, scent, or emotion, it triggers the release of this molecule from the endothelial cells lining the blood vessels. Nitric oxide acts like a messenger, signaling the smooth muscles around the arteries to relax. As they relax, the arteries expand, allowing more blood to flow in. In men, that blood fills the erectile tissue of the penis. In women, it fills the erectile tissue of the clitoris, the vestibular bulbs, and the labia. That's right. Erectile tissue is not exclusive to men. The female body contains just as much of it, distributed throughout the pelvis. The clitoris, for example, is made of the same kind of tissue as the penis, the corpus cavernosum, and it functions in exactly the same way. It swells, it stiffens, and it becomes more sensitive as blood flow increases. The vestibular bulbs, which sit on either side of the vaginal opening, also engorge during arousal, creating a gentle pressure that enhances internal sensation. Even the vaginal walls become thick and elastic, preparing the body for deeper connection. It's a vascular symphony, a choreography of circulation that makes pleasure possible. Dr. Berman's research used Doppler ultrasound imaging to observe these changes in real time. What she found was eye-opening. Women with reduced genital blood flow, often due to stress, hormonal imbalance, or vascular issues, reported decreased sensitivity and difficulty achieving orgasm. When their circulation improved, through lifestyle changes or medical treatment, so did their sexual function. The conclusion was undeniable. Blood flow is not a side effect of arousal. It is the engine that drives it. The parallels with male physiology go even further. Both men and women rely on the same key enzymes and neurotransmitters to sustain arousal. The enzyme phosphodiesterase type 5, PDE5, for example, is responsible for breaking down the chemical signals that maintain vasodilation. Medications like sildenafil, commonly known as Viagra, work by inhibiting this enzyme, allowing blood to stay in the erectile tissues longer. Interestingly, when similar treatments were tested in women, they also improved genital blood flow and sensitivity, though the results varied because female arousal involves more emotional and contextual factors. Still, the science was clear. The vascular system plays the same fundamental role in both sexes. But while the mechanisms are similar, the experience is beautifully different. In men, arousal tends to be more localized, more visually triggered, and more binary, on or off. In women, it's diffuse, gradual, and deeply influenced by emotion and trust. The blood doesn't just flow to one organ, it flows to many, spreading warmth through the pelvis, chest, and even the skin. This is why women often describe arousal as a wave or a spreading glow, rather than a single focused reaction. It's the same physiological principle, expressed through a more intricate network. Blood flow, then, is not just about physical readiness, it's about communication. When circulation increases, it sends signals to the brain that amplify arousal. The brain, in turn, releases dopamine and oxytocin, enhancing pleasure and connection. It's a feedback loop between the body and the mind, a dialogue carried on through blood and chemistry. The heart, quite literally, becomes part of the conversation. What's even more profound is how emotions directly influence this process. When a woman feels safe, cared for, or desired, her body releases nitric oxide more easily. Her arteries open, blood flows freely. But when she feels stressed, anxious, or disconnected, the body produces cortisol and adrenaline instead, hormones that constrict blood vessels and limit flow. That means emotional safety and trust are not just romantic concepts, they are biological necessities. The body cannot sustain arousal in a state of defense. The same is true for men, though often less recognized. The body must feel safe to open. This is why Dr. Berman emphasizes lifestyle factors in her clinical practice. She found that women with cardiovascular health issues often experience lower arousal, not because of desire, but because of circulation. Smoking, poor diet, and sedentary habits all impair blood vessel function, reducing genital responsiveness. On the other hand, exercise, hydration, and stress management all enhance vascular health, and by extension, sexual function. The connection is so strong that improving cardiovascular fitness can directly increase arousal. In fact, the same arteries that feed the heart feed the pelvis. The better the blood flow, the better the body responds. But let's take a closer look at the emotional dimension of this. When a woman experiences emotional connection, her brain's hypothalamus and limbic system send signals down the spinal cord to release nitric oxide. That chemical widens arteries in the genital region, increasing warmth and sensitivity. As blood flow rises, the tissues swell and press against surrounding nerves, intensifying sensation. This increased input from the body travels back to the brain, deepening emotional arousal. It's a loop that grows stronger with mutual attunement. Pleasure literally circulates, physically, emotionally, and relationally. It's also worth noting that the rhythm of blood flow mirrors the rhythm of touch and breath. Slow, deep breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which promotes vasodilation. Rapid, shallow breathing activates the sympathetic system, which constricts it. That's why calm, connected breathing enhances pleasure. It increases oxygenation, steadies the heartbeat, and supports sustained blood flow. Every sigh, every pause, Every heartbeat becomes part of the body's natural rhythm of arousal. In one of Dr. Berman's studies, women who practiced mindful breathing and relaxation before intimacy showed a 30% increase in genital blood flow compared to those who didn't. That's measurable proof that presence, not performance, is the foundation of pleasure. When the body is relaxed, it receives. When it's tense, it protects. The bloodstream becomes the messenger of that difference. And here's the part that's often overlooked. Arousal is not confined to the genitals. When blood flow increases during arousal, it also affects the brain, skin, and even the heart. Brain scans show heightened activity in the prefrontal cortex, the insula, and the amygdala, areas responsible for emotion, attention, and reward. The skin becomes more sensitive as capillaries open, creating the familiar flush of arousal. Even the breasts swell slightly as blood flow rises. The entire body becomes an organ of pleasure. The same vascular mechanism that powers a heartbeat fuels desire, sensation, and connection. This is why stress is so damaging to intimacy. When cortisol levels rise, they constrict arteries and suppress nitric oxide. The blood that should be flowing freely becomes sluggish. The heart works harder, but the pleasure circuits go quiet. Dr. Berman often compares this to trying to grow flowers in frozen soil. You can plant all the seeds you want, but nothing will bloom if the environment isn't right. The soil of pleasure is circulation, and circulation depends on calm. Interestingly, both men and women benefit from similar remedies when circulation falters. Aerobic exercise improves vascular elasticity, antioxidants protect endothelial function, and even hydration plays a role in maintaining healthy flow. But for women, the added dimension is emotional context. The same vessel that carries oxygen also carries feeling. The heart and the pelvis are connected not just by blood, but by meaning. This is why emotional connection can sometimes ignite arousal even without physical touch. A word, a look, a tone of voice, all of these can trigger the release of nitric oxide, beginning the cascade of blood flow. The brain interprets safety, affection, and attention as signals to open. The body listens. It's also why trauma, neglect, or chronic stress can create long-term disruptions in arousal. When the nervous system learns to associate intimacy with fear or tension, it keeps blood vessels constricted even in safe situations. Healing, then, involves retraining the body to trust again, to allow blood to flow, to let the heart and pelvis reconnect. Dr. Berman often combines physiological treatments with therapy or mindfulness to restore that balance. The goal isn't just physical arousal, it's wholeness. And the deeper we look into the parallels between male and female physiology, the clearer the message becomes. Both systems are built to reward connection. In both, blood flow represents openness. In both, trust and relaxation unlock the process. The difference is that in women, the system is layered with emotional intelligence. Pleasure and connection are inseparable. The same flow that brings sensitivity also brings bonding. If we were to visualize this process, it would look like a current moving through the body, a slow, powerful wave beginning in the brain, traveling down the spine, pulsing through the pelvis, and returning upward to the heart. That current carries more than blood. It carries awareness. It carries emotion. It carries life. So when we talk about female arousal as vascular, we're not reducing it to biology. We're honoring its brilliance. The body uses the same mechanism that sustains life to create pleasure. Blood flow doesn't just nourish tissue. It nourishes intimacy. It's a reminder that the same pulse that keeps us alive also allows us to connect, to feel, to love. In the end, the parallels between male and female arousal aren't a coincidence. They're a reflection of balance. Both systems, though different in expression, operate on the same truth. That pleasure is not separate from health, that desire is not separate from circulation, and that love itself has a physiology. The body, in its infinite wisdom, designed us to experience connection, not as an abstract idea, but as a living rhythm pulsing through our veins. When Dr. Berman says, arousal is the body's heartbeat of intimacy, she's not speaking metaphorically. She's describing the real, measurable truth that blood flow is the language of desire, the bridge between emotion and sensation. Every heartbeat is an invitation to slow down, to listen, to connect. And maybe that's what makes human intimacy so miraculous. Beneath the layers of psychology, culture, and emotion, it all comes down to one simple, universal rhythm. The flow of blood, the pulse of life, the body's silent way of saying, I am here. I am open. I am alive. Why is it that a woman can be physically touched in every way that should, in theory, bring pleasure, and yet feel nothing if her mind and heart are not engaged? Why is it that emotional connection, trust, and mental stimulation can sometimes ignite arousal even in the absence of physical contact? These are not mysteries of the mind alone. They are rooted in biology. Emotional safety and psychological stimulation are not luxuries or nice-to-haves. They are biological triggers, deeply encoded into the female nervous system, influencing everything from blood flow to hormone release to the body's ability to receive pleasure. The female brain is exquisitely sensitive to emotional context. When Dr. Jennifer Berman and other researchers studied female sexual arousal using brain imaging, they found something remarkable. Before the body responds, the brain checks for safety. The limbic system, the emotional processing center, acts as a gatekeeper. If it senses threat, tension, or lack of trust, it signals the hypothalamus to suppress arousal pathways. The reason is simple but profound. Evolution designed the female body to prioritize safety over reproduction. The body cannot open if the mind believes it's in danger. Safety, then, is not merely psychological, it's physiological. When a woman feels emotionally secure, her brain releases oxytocin and dopamine. Oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone, lowers stress, reduces cortisol, and relaxes smooth muscle tissue, including the arteries that supply blood to the pelvis. This allows for greater circulation, more sensitivity, and deeper arousal. Dopamine, meanwhile, activates the brain's reward circuitry, turning anticipation and emotional intimacy into pleasure itself. It's not imagination, it's chemistry. But when safety is absent, the opposite occurs. The amygdala, which governs fear and threat detection, activates the body's stress response. Adrenaline and cortisol flood the system, constricting blood vessels and diverting blood away from the genitals toward the muscles, preparing for fight or flight. The same biological system that evolved to protect survival now inadvertently suppresses pleasure. That is why anxiety, resentment, or emotional distance can physically shut down arousal. The body isn't disinterested, it's defending itself. This is also why psychological stimulation, curiosity, playfulness, anticipation can be so powerful for women. When the mind is engaged, when imagination and desire dance together, the brain releases not just dopamine, but also norepinephrine, a neurotransmitter that heightens focus and excitement. It's the biological version of leaning in. The heart beats a little faster, the skin warms, and the body prepares to feel. In this way, mental and emotional engagement are part of the same circuitry as touch. The mind lights the fuse. The body carries the flame. In male arousal, the trigger can be more visually or physically direct, often bypassing emotional evaluation. But in women, arousal is a system-wide event. The body needs to feel safe, the heart needs to feel seen, and the mind needs to feel alive. Dr. Berman often explains it this way. For women, the largest sexual organ is the brain. That's not poetic exaggeration, it's neuroscience. The brain initiates and sustains arousal by integrating emotional cues with sensory input. In one study conducted at the University of Groningen, researchers observed that during female arousal, areas of the brain associated with vigilance, like the prefrontal cortex, begin to quiet down, while areas linked to sensory pleasure and connection light up. But this only happens when the woman feels emotionally secure. If she feels judged, pressured, or emotionally disconnected, those vigilance centers stay active, preventing full arousal. In other words, the body literally cannot relax into pleasure while the brain is